There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart, that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
You are listening to a Rankandfile.ca podcast. Rankandfile.ca is a website dedicated to providing labor news and analysis for rebuilding trade unions and the workers' movement from below.
This is David Bush from Rankandfile.ca. I'm here talking to Kyle Buott, the president of the Halifax Dartmouth District Labour Council. Kyle, I just wanted to ask you, as Labor Day approaches, we thought it would be a good time to talk to different labour leaders about the state of the Canadian labour movement, where it's at, what challenges it faces, what are its potentials, and what do you see coming for the new year of labour struggle?
I think the key question with the state of the Canadian labour movement is, when does the labour movement in Canada wake up to what's going on around the world? So here in North America, over the last 2 years, we've seen the rise and fall of major social movements for the first time, certainly in my lifetime. Whether it's trade unionists in Wisconsin, the Quebec student strike, what happened with Idle No More, and of course the Occupy movement around the world. The key component that's missing from all that, and that we actually see happen in other countries, is what role does the labor movement play? And what does the largest democratic and popular movement in the country have to say about the crisis that our country is facing? So I think that is kind of the state that we're in right now. It's one of anticipation. It's one of wondering where we're at and where we're about to go. And I think there's a key role for trade union activists and radicals to play in continuing to push that struggle forward.
I just wanted to ask you on the local level, what is the Halifax Dartmouth District Labour Council going to be doing in the next year or two? What are its goals? What are its hopes in terms of organizing and pushing for the broader working class?
Well, as a Labour Council, our goal is to try to play a role of a Labour Central in our city. And so that means trying to pull together our affiliate unions and social movement allies to figure out which direction we need to be moving in. I think one of the things the Labour Council does is try to make events that we hold on a regular basis and things that people kind of recognize as part of our organization, if you will. And so one of our examples is our Troublemakers Conference, and we're going into our second annual Troublemakers Conference at the end of October. And this conference is all about teaching people how to fight back and how to enforce your collective agreement on the shop floor. What we've got right now is an arbitration process that is broken. It was never set up to help workers in this country in the first place. It was set up to contain us. And for too long, the labor movement has accepted this legal argument around what our role really is. What the Troublemakers Conference tries to do is use examples and concrete examples from here in Halifax and around North America on how workers are fighting back on the shop floor and taking action in their workplaces to actually enforce their collective agreement. So that'll be one of the directions that we take, and we hope that that's kind of an inspirational event for local leaders, and that it gives them the confidence to go back to the workplace and then start taking those actions at whatever point in negotiations makes sense. So that's one piece. Beyond that, part of what the Labour Movement Council really tries to do is to build a culture of solidarity. And we define that by building a labour movement that people actually want to be part of and want to participate in. I will take the liberty of saying that the Halifax Dartmouth District Labour Council meetings are probably the most fun union meetings you'll ever end up in. I'd invite anybody across the country to come visit us sometime. But what we really hope to do is develop a sense of camaraderie between our activists and between local union leaders. One of the ways we do that is by engaging in cultural work, specifically our Mayworks Halifax Festival, which will be in its 5th year this year. And Mayworks is really designed to bring artists and workers together to use art to explore economic and social justice. And we found that it also creates a really good week of nights out for trade union activists to explore that culture as well, which has really helped create some of the relationships that are key to building a labour council and building relationships between local unions and social movements. So I look at those two pieces, our work on trying to create shop floor rank and file activism, and then the work that we're doing around cultural issues as a key component of the Labour Council's work for the next couple of years.
All right, great. I just wanted to ask you, you talked about Idle No More, Occupy, and then also what's going on internationally with things like the Arab Spring, what's going on in Egypt, Greece, and across Europe, and even Brazil and Turkey. But I want to ask you, in Canada and maybe even North America, what gives you hope and what's inspiring in terms of labor struggles that are currently going on? And what can other activists who are in the trade union movement learn from those?
I think we're at a key moment in North America around trade union history, and it's very similar to the moment that we were at in the 1930s and the birth of industrial unionism. In the 1930s, you had a debate between craft unions and industrial unions. Today, that debate still exists, but to a lesser degree. But the key difference there was that in order to change to economic circumstances, unions had to change how they were actually organizing and how they were structuring their organizations. We're at the same point today. And so when you talk about what gives people hope across the country, it's some of the new and innovative organizing drives that are bringing new workers into the labor movement. Here in Nova Scotia, we've been really lucky with the Baristas Rise Up campaign, which is organizing coffee workers across the city. We've also seen the Justice for Genders campaign, of course, which is being run across North America and is organizing low-wage workers in the service sector, an area that is difficult to touch at best. So those pieces kind of give me hope that a new generation of trade union activists are exploring what models might make sense in today's economy for how to organize campaigns. I also think a key component of the hope, I guess, if you will, is that rising level of struggle that we see across North America. And I often think back to when the Great Recession started in 2008 and the Chicago windows and doors occupation was kind of the opening shot, I guess, in that one. And those workers fought back, occupied their plant, and won. And I think getting that story out there, and as stories like that have started to spread and other things like that have been successful, we're seeing a new level of grassroots mobilization across the country. It's there, it's not supported yet, and it's growing, but the question is how we turn that into something else.
I just wanted to ask you, we're also, this Labor Day long weekend, will be the upcoming convention, founding convention of Unifor, the new union that is the merger of the CAW and the CEP. I know that you're going to be a future member of Unifor, and I was just wondering if you had any thoughts about what that union will mean in terms of struggle on the Canadian labor scene.
I think Unifor is an attempt to do things a little differently and to look at that structure of the labor movement that we've been using for the last 70 years and try to say, okay, how can we shift it to make it work a little bit better? So the new community chapters that Unifor will have, where people who are not members of a union at their workplace will be able to join the union and participate in Unifor structures, will be very interesting. At the same time, the National Union has decided that the setup of those type of community coalitions will be based on locals, CAW locals, or CAW CEP locals taking that on. That kind of abdicates a responsibility at the national level to do that type of work, and it means that only large enough locals that have existing activists and existing resources will be able to engage in that type of work. So I think that will be a major challenge for us in Unifor, is to push the organization to make sure that we are looking at community coalitions and how we can build them. Specifically here in the Atlantic region, we've just had some phenomenal news, and that is that Lana Payne, the president of the Newfoundland Federation of Labor, is now going to be the Atlantic director for Unifor. Lana will be a breath of fresh air in a very serious way in this region, and it will be the first time for those of us in the Atlantic that will have control over our union's direction in the region. It's previously all been concentrated in Ontario. It's not a criticism, it's just the reality of working out here is a little different. And Lana, I think, will be a breath of fresh air, and I think we'll see a commitment to a new way of organizing in Unifor here in the Atlantic region because of that.
I just wanted to ask you, I noticed that you're wearing the shirt that the Halifax Dartmouth District Labour Council has produced, and it has the slogan, "Capitalism isn't working for workers." And I would like to ask you a little bit about the story of that t-shirt, where it came from, why you collectively decided to adopt that slogan, and what does that mean for you?
Well, I guess I'll give you the history piece first and then the what it means section. So the Labour Council adopted the slogan, "Capitalism isn't working for workers," in September 2008 as the financial markets were collapsing and as we went into the Great Recession. And it was pretty clear to our executive and to our delegates at that moment that we were at a historical moment, really, right? And that this was something that was probably not going to happen again in our lifetimes. Now, given the state of the economy, it might very well happen again. But we decided that we could pretty easily adopt a slogan that was pretty clear, right? Capitalism isn't working for workers. We weren't declaring ourselves for some kind of alternative, which we might have a lot more debate on. But we were saying a pretty pointed critique of the capitalist system overall. And that has actually been adopted fairly resoundingly successfully across Halifax and across the country as well. We've put over 500 of those t-shirts out there. We've sold them all. We've had buttons, we've had banners. They get sent across the country. You see almost at any union convention some of our t-shirts around at some point. It's a slogan that actually really resonates with folks. And one of the main things our activists love is that when they're wearing it out in public, they get questions about it and comments about what a great slogan it is and how folks would love to get them. We can't even keep them in stock. So it's been a really interesting exercise for us in trying to really get at the central point of all of our social struggles, which is the capitalist system itself. If the trade union movement is not critiquing capitalism, we're actually failing to represent the working class overall. And so I think bringing that back here in Halifax has been really, really successful, and it's helped us build considerably in the city. In terms of what it actually means and what we mean by it, it's actually pretty clear. You know, the system is not set up to work for working people. It's set up to work for a handful of people at the top. In the Occupy movement, they called it the 1%. I usually call it the ruling class, the folks that run our economy on a day-to-day basis, or think they do. And behind this, of course, is an implicit critique that if capitalism isn't working, then maybe something else could. And I would call that socialism. I'm a socialist, but certainly I think it opens that window to a broader debate that has been lacking in the labor movement for quite some time. And that's what we were hoping to do, is really put it out there, see who found it interesting, and it's helped build an organization here in Halifax. I would certainly credit just a simple t-shirt with doing some of that work for us. So.
Right, and do you encourage other trade union activists to adopt that slogan and get that t-shirt? And
certainly we would encourage them to wear it, and happy to have them do that. It's not something where we've gone out and set it as our mission to convince the labor movement that this is the slogan we need to organize around. More so that it's an attempt to begin a conversation, both in the Labour Council, but also in each and every one of our unions, about what Labour's critique of the current economic situation should be. And like I said, we believe that if it doesn't include a critique of capitalism itself, that we're not doing our job properly.
And just one final question. I want to ask you a little bit about the NDP federally, and it's the relation between Labour and the NDP, and also what the Conservative government has meant in terms of squashing Labour's struggles and making it really hard for the working class to achieve victories and gains. Is there a way Labour can fight back in these times?
So the first thing I'd say about that is that the Harper government is out to annihilate the Labour movement. This isn't just about messing with us on the sidelines. It's not about making our lives more difficult. It's about systematically destroying one of the only organized forces in the country capable of challenging government. And I think it's important for us not to lose sight of that. The situation around the NDP is obviously a lot more complicated. In the last federal election, the NDP formed the official opposition for the first time. And certainly many of our members worked on that campaign, were involved in that campaign, and will likely support the NDP going forward into the future as well. I think it's important to note, though, that the NDP, and certainly my union, the CAW right now, but soon to be Unifor, is not necessarily a partisan union. We're not necessarily supporting of the NDP, because the NDP doesn't always stand where we'd like them to right now. And the free trade agreement and NAFTA is a prime example. The NDP federally is fully in favor of free trade. The labor movement's not. And so that creates some disagreement. That said, when we look at what the other options are, so to go to Harper or to look at Justin Trudeau, there's a great quote about the Liberal and Conservatives, that they're different arms of the same body, or different asses of the same, or different cheeks of the same ass. And I always remember that when thinking about federal politics, is that the NDP may not be perfect, but certainly we've got a better option than the Liberals or Conservatives. So I think Labour's relationship to the federal NDP is going to be increasingly complex. I think there'll be a lot of discussion after the next federal election about what that relationship should look like, and happy to hopefully be part of it.
Great. And I just wanted to say, if people want to get one of your lovely t-shirts or check up about news with the Halifax Dartmouth District Labour Council, they could go
to halifaxlabor.ca. You can also check us out on Facebook at Halifax Labour, or on Twitter with the signal or that sign off as at Halifax Labour.
And on Labor Day, you will be?
I will be here in Halifax. I won't be at the Unifor Convention, unfortunately, but we'll be here 10 o'clock, Victoria Park, and ready to have a march and picnic after that.
All right. Well, thanks, Kyle Buott from the Halifax Dartmouth District Labour Council, President, for joining us. And Rank and File signing off.